Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grant Lodge statements or positions, especially this one. So make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, you can send questions and comments to our Facebook page for episode 247, A Modern Take on the Moderns, or on the YouTube chat running alongside this video. Hello and good evening to all of the live viewers. As for me, my name is John Ruark. I am a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And I will now introduce Robert Johnson. Robert, say hi.
Hi, Robert Johnson from Space Novum Lodge, where I'm the current sitting secretary and a podcaster and stuff. Okay.
Stuff and things. Thank you, Robert. Next up, Juan Sepulveda.
Hello, everyone. Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast. Good evening.
Thank you, Juan. Good evening. Good evening. Next up, Jason Richards. Hi, Jason.
Hi, John. Good evening, everybody. Jason Richards here, past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C.
All right. And for a special guest tonight, we have friend and brother and all-around Illuminati expert, Josef Wäges.
And returning TMR host.
That's right. Welcome back, Joseph.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It looks like, I think September the 9th of 2015, or no, 14 was the last time we did this. So yeah, it's been almost 5 years, yeah.
Wow. Well, we need to not make that so long next time. But welcome back. Any other little lodge affiliations or anything you want to mention now?
Oh, sure. So this last year it was a Blue Friar. We can put up the Dallas Valley Scottish Rite, Plano Lodge, Fate Lodge. Sorted Lodges Research, National Lodges Research. They'll kill me if I don't say that one. So that's pretty much it.
That's enough for any one man, for sure. Well, congratulations on all those accomplishments. Before we get into tonight,
and your new book series that's coming out soon, which I can't wait to get.
Actually, they're up on Amazon right now, if you believe that or not.
What? Well, just volume 1, right?
Yeah, just volume 1, but we've got like 4 other books done. Haven't put them up for sale yet. And officially, we didn't roll out the other one yet either because I'm having shopping cart issues, but it will get fixed.
You're a machine, man. You really are. So before we get into tonight's episode, I want to thank all the patrons for supporting the show. We're upgrading some hardware this year and getting other things logistically planned out for all the cons that we're going to this year. So it's been a big help already. And if you want to support the show and kind of get into a little private Facebook group where you can chat with us anytime, hop on over and become a Squire or Knight level patron. So thank you. Now, into tonight's episode, we wanted to take a modern spin on this whole ancient modern split. Now, we've talked about the ancients and moderns way back in I think within the first year of the podcast. But tonight, Brother Wäges is going to give us a little spin, a little insight on some of the research that he's found on really what were some of the nuances between the ancient and modern split, and some by looking at some of the exposés at the time to maybe find out some differences that may have been left unnoticed. So before we dive in, Joseph, will you go into, for any of our new listeners, just a little bit of background of what's the difference between these ancients and moderns, and what's the overall context there?
Okay, so quick history lesson for those that may not be informed. So Freemasonry, it starts from like operative masonry. You have the Premier Grand Lodge, aka the Moderns, formed in 1717. They run up to 1813 when they merge with the Ancients Grand Lodge, forming the United Grand Lodge of England. That's why they're the United Grand Lodge. Then you've got the Ancients that pop up in 1751. And they're basically at loggerheads with each other. They're competing, not just in England, but throughout the British Empire at this point. They're in direct competition, and really the Ancients get the upper hand. And at the end of the thing, at the merger in 1813, the ritual becomes basically an Ancients ritual. They gain the upper hand. They've got more influence and everything. Moderns have the building and the infrastructure and the funds, and so it's a shotgun wedding. Do you? Yes. Do you? Yes. And they're married, and that's it in a nutshell.
All right. So now, just as a thing that helps keep it straight, or at least for me, is when I was explaining it to one brother this week, he's like, "Oh, so it's like opposite day, right? The ancients were the more modern one because they were doing all these innovations in masonry, and the moderns were the more ancient, or the older one, the older group at the time, right?"
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so it's funny because there were essentially two groups of Masons, and this one group said, well, the group that's in power is doing it all wrong, and we know the right way to do it, so we're going to call ourselves the ancients. We'll call them the moderns because they're not actually doing the right system of degrees.
Which I'm sure offended no one, right? And everyone got along perfectly.
It certainly didn't cause a split that took almost 100 years to remedy.
Right. I've also heard that they called the moderns who were older moderns because that they were the first to change something. I don't know, but I bet Joe does.
He may, perhaps.
So tell us a little bit about your research then, Joe. What's something that's new and exciting about this topic?
Okay. Well, so for tonight's required reading, we can go into this stuff really in depth, but it's not going to be a good use of our time. And really, the reader should educate themselves. So I recommend Early Masonic Catechisms by Carr. There's about to be a new version of that. AQC is about to put out another version of it that's been updated and expanded. I think within a year and a half, it comes out. Brothers De Hoyos and Morris are doing that book, and it's going to be fantastic. And so that's the required reading for the thing. And so tonight, like, it's going to sound like what I'm saying is really controversial, but the thing is, none of us on this call, although we are all members of Grand Lodges that practice an ancient form of masonry, at the end of the day, none of us are ancients or moderns, so we should probably divorce ourselves of like emotion, charge language, things like that. We're just talking about history here. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start out.
Masonry is never that simple, Joe.
I know. That's me trying to harmonize things. Okay, so let's start out with a bold statement, and here's where the lightning strikes. So the Ancients Grand Lodge was basically formed clandestinely and irregularly in 1751.
What? The ancients are clandestine. Let me make sure I heard you correctly.
Well, they were formed clandestinely and irregularly. Is what I'm saying. I'm not saying they are clandestine or their rituals clandestine per se, but the way that they're formed is. And so,
wow,
it begs the question, like, why is the Ancients Grand Lodge clandestine and irregular? Okay, well, let's think about let's define the terms then. So clandestine is marked by, held in, or conducted with secrecy, right? Then we've got the definition of irregular. It's not being or acting in accordance with the law, rules, or established custom, or not following a usual prescribed procedure, or not belonging to any part of a regular organized group, but more importantly, lacking continuity or regularity, especially of occurrence or activity, right? Okay, so how are they irregular, right? They're practicing Freemasonry. The moderns are practicing Freemasonry. The reason why they're irregular is they've invaded the sovereign territory of the premier Grand Lodge of England. Okay, so if we look at Anderson's constitutions, not only in 1723, but also in 1738, it makes it clear that all new lodges being formed have to gain the approval of the Grand Master, and all those who fail to comply they're basically to be countenanced as rebels. And so specifically, there's one article that it stands out. So Article 7, and it's the same in the 1723 and 38 edition, says, no set number of brethren shall withdraw or separate themselves from the lodge in which they were made brethren, or afterwards admitted members, unless the lodge becomes too numerous, nor even then without a dispensation from the Grand Master or his deputy. And here's the important part, though. It says, and when they are thus separated, they must either immediately join themselves to such other lodges as they shall like best, with the unanimous consent of that other lodge to which they go, as above regulated, or else they must obtain the Grand Master's warrant to join in forming a new lodge. Next paragraph. Any set or number of Masons shall take upon themselves to form a lodge without the Grand Master's warrant. The regular lodges are not to countenance them or own them as fair brethren. and duly formed, nor approve their acts and deeds, but must treat them as rebels until they humble themselves, as the Grand Master shall in his prudence direct, and until he approve of them by his warrant, which must be signified to the other lodges, as is the custom when a lodge is to be registered in the list of lodges. So blah, 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 what I just say there. Basically, it says that they are not regular, so they're not to countenance them as fair brethren, meaning clandestine Masons. I mean, it's black letter of the law. Well, I hear a bunch of people have the counter argument, and they're saying, well, wait a second, these guys that formed the Ancients Grand Lodge, they're Irish Masons. Well, maybe they got permission from the Grand Lodge of Ireland, but doesn't that work out just fine? Another problem, though. So the Grand Lodge of Ireland is likely a daughter Grand Lodge of the Premier Grand Lodge. And a lot of people don't like that idea at all.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
But it's true. And more importantly, if that's the case, if they are the daughter, and I believe that they are, and we'll talk about it here in a second, Anderson's Constitution was the law of the land in Ireland as well. So they were obliged to follow these constitutions, right? So another point here is that, let me get to that spot. Where was it? Okay, yeah, so it went as far as what they're supposed to follow in Rule 7, it says that the candidate shall also solemnly promise to submit to the Constitution's charges, regulations, and other such good usages as shall be intimated to them in a time and place convenient. So again, these guys who are from the Irish Grand Lodge, they come over here to England, they move there. Really, like the whole schism is about that they try to gain admission to English lodges. Lawrence Dermott, he was the Grand Secretary, but as we all know, the Secretary is really the power behind the throne, right? And so he forms this Ancients Grand Lodge. All these guys are Irish Masons. They're trying to gain admission to English Grand Lodges, but the English don't want them coming in because they see them as, poor people who are going to drain the charity fund. That's what the whole schism is all about, is they don't want to let these guys in because they're going to bankrupt us. And that's what their whole fear is. And that's what kind of gets things going at a loggerheads here. So, these guys are Irish Masons. They're detached from a lodge. They don't form a new lodge. They don't get the Grand Master's consent. But we just said a second ago that the Grand Lodge of Ireland is likely a daughter of the Grand Lodge of England. Well, how do we know that at all to be true at all? The truth is that the Grand Lodge of Ireland was formed in 1725 on June 24th, St. John's Day, but there's no foundational documents. They don't have any documents in the archive, like nothing for this.
Wow.
And so it's like, well, how do we know that this is even true? Well, the way we know is there's 2 newspaper accounts that are proved, right? So in the Dublin Weekly Journal on June 26, 1725, it preserves the installation of the Grand Master, of their first Grand Master, the Earl of Ross. And also, where it gets really interesting is there's another account. It's only like 6 lines, but it's in the Post Boy in London. Have you guys heard the Post Boy before?
Yes, from I know some research that Brent Morris has done.
That's exactly right. So in 1723, there was like a satirical expose that they supposedly talk about Freemasonry, but they give like everything totally wrong. So it's probably a Mason writing this stuff.
Yes, it's denial and deception.
Yeah, that's right. And so what's going on here is
the 18th century past bastard.
So what's funny about this is it's reported in Ireland, but it's also strangely reported in England. Well, that's kind of odd because if we look at it, why would basically a local event be reported in England? The conclusions I draw for it, and also like reading the actual newspaper account, it kind of hints that they're a daughter. Does it say a black letter of the law? No. Does any documents exist to prove this? No. That's my sense of it, because it's so weird and random that it would be reported in a London newspaper where the Freemasons are reading. Why? Because they're putting satires in there just a couple of years before. I think that's what's going on here. And, can we prove it conclusively? No, we can't. But that's the sense of it. So what we've just established is that they're clandestinely formed because they're supposed to be operating under Anderson's constitutions. They're not following the law in Rule 7 and in Rule 8. And more importantly, that they've got no reason to do any of this stuff. And so what's happened here is they've not been allowed to get admission to these English lodges, and they formed their own Grand Lodge. And it's kind of strange because we can really start talking about the ritual differences here without, spelling out anything we shouldn't. Well, what's the difference at all in this ritual between the ancients and the moderns? Turns out it's quite a bit, because what the ancient supposition is that the moderns are a newer form of Masonry and they're preserving these operatives traditions. Well, it's really funny though, because we know that the Master Mason degree, it comes into being somewhere around 1725. Well, not only do they count that in the new Ancients degree system, but they've also added in the Royal Arch. And so what's happening is you see them building on a system that already exists. So if they're the older institution, how is it they have the new degree and another degree on top of it?
So it's the old and the new.
That's right. So we're super ancient.
Well, that only the title of super ancient really does fit, right? I mean, like Cryptic Masonry has the super excellent, amazing, also another excellent master degree.
Squared.
Yeah, we just keep adding super to whatever. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's almost as if it just feels so politically charged. It feels well. So, and everybody out there listening, Joe told me about this research of his a while ago, and when he told me, I immediately was like, I'm clandestine. I was cheated.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's crazy, because like you sit back and you start to think about this. Okay, well, the ritual system in every English-speaking country derives from ancient-based ritual. I mean, there's elements from the old moderns ritual in there. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, literally, our entire like Masonic systems in the English-speaking world derive from this ritual. Well, we should probably define, like, what are the differences between the two things here? So we've already established that, they're claiming that it's an ancient system, yet they're bringing in not only a degree created in 1725 and calling it authentic, but in point of fact, they've added in a new degree, the Royal Arch, into their system. Doesn't sound very good starting out. And so when you go back and you look at early Masonic catechisms and you read everything, pre-1751, which is what the focus of that book is, you gain a sense that, first off, like the real expose that shows like all three degrees that the moderns are working is, why did I just think of that? Masonry Dissected, and it's printed in 1730. So whether you count 1717 or 1721 as the founding date of the Premier Grand Lodge, doesn't really make a big difference here, because we're talking, either 9 to 13 years in difference. So,
so real quick, I'm going to stop you there. What's your call? 1717 or 1721? Joseph Wäges' opinion only.
Wait. Okay, so you guys ever hear of Rick Berman?
Yes.
Have we ever heard of the Prestonian lecturer?
The Prestonian lecturer.
He's got a theory that I think is right on the money. And his theory is that there was stuff going on in 1717. It could be just a bunch of guys meeting. Was it at the apple tree? Probably not. Well, I think we can write that one off. But was Anderson even there? No, he wasn't there at all.
Nope.
And it was after the fact. We're talking like 1738 at this point when he's writing this history. And so probably what happens is he gets the story secondhand. It's like, oh yeah, it was the apple tree. We're all hanging out down there. It was really fun. And that really wasn't the case at all. But it doesn't mean that they weren't meeting. But I think why it's 1721, right? So they have to have the Duke of Montague. Well, why is this? Because they need someone who's, for like lesser nobility, basically. They need a patron to get behind the system. So they have a couple guys. Maybe they don't do a whole lot of anything. Maybe they don't even meet that much. That could be true, right? But at the end of the day, I think 1721 probably is when things get interesting. But they probably were meeting beforehand. So I think Rick has the right idea on that one.
Let me ask you this: when you mentioned this, does anybody ever bring up the fact that while the Royal Arch degree is supposed to not be old, like this idea that it was being practiced everywhere, just like and never talked about and never in the minutes, and that this kind of idea somehow fortifies the idea that the ancients are the correct ones to be a part of?
Yeah, so that's actually a really common argument. People throw that back. Well, first they'll say, "Oh, well, that York Constitution of 926, well, it authorizes everything." Well, when you go back and you look at the old charges, the York Constitution or the York Lodge, what is it? No, yeah, York Constitution of 926. It's bull, right? So what they're doing is they're establishing like continuity because, and Rick does a good lecture on this one too, where like you go through it, and what they're trying to do is they've not been allowed to change labor prices as they're going along. So what they're trying to do is make it look like they've got a custom, right? It's a tradition. We've always been able to change our wages, and that's what it was when it's an operatives thing. So that's what the whole purpose of that York Constitution of 926. It was for optics, so that way that they could raise wages for operative masons. That's the whole purpose of it in there. And if you go to YouTube, Rick's got a really good talk on it. Just Google or YouTube Rick Berman, and he's got 2 or 3 videos. It's one of those, and it's really good listen.
Yeah,
but as far as
he's an awesome speaker.
Oh yeah,
he's a good
friend of mine. Like we were in Oslo, and like we went on a pub crawl, and I don't think we got back to our hotels till like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was awesome.
doing research, right? That's what
research. Yes. But so going back to that Royal Arch thing, so there's one book that was published in Ireland, 1745 or 6, I can't remember. But anyways, they're saying that, well, over here in York, they're already practicing this Royal Arch and da 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 da. Well, here's the trouble with that book is if back in the 18th century, if you wanted to publish a book, you didn't have any money, you got subscribers. They put the money up front, they do their thing, and bam, you've got a book. They get a free copy, and it's a patronage system, right? Guess who's one of the patrons of that book that says, "Oh yeah, the Royal Arch has been around"? Well, it's Lawrence Dermott. Surprise!
Yep.
Because it starts getting interesting. So yeah, I don't put a lot of stock into that one, and more importantly, I'm working on a project right now with undisclosed members, but the book will be coming here probably within a year and a half, where we can take it all the way from Scots Master to Royal Arch in that order, how it happened and why it happened with manuscript proof. So we're working on that right now, and it's not looking too good for the ancients.
Yeah, I've seen some of your research on this, Joe, and it's fantastic. And you guys are in for a treat eventually.
Yeah.
It's like a destroyer of the dissonance. There's just nothing left. We have like no leg to stand on, which is really interesting because how are we going to move on from that? Are they going to do this thing where they go, Masonry, when they did the 1721, 1717 thing, they were like, oh yeah, there's all this evidence, but you know what? It's 300 years ago, 300 years, whatever, doesn't matter. It's the tradition of Masonry that matters. And they stand on this, right? So
I think we're going to summarily ignore it.
That's what I mean. Like we're going to go, oh, check out this amazing thing. Holy cow. We're all clandestine, or we're based on a clandestine system, or what. Like, obviously that's not going to happen, but like anybody who recognizes the scholarly work is going to go, yeah, what the hell? Where are the degrees? Where are the cool degrees?
Well, and that's what's funny too, is like, without giving it all, let's go ahead and we'll just hit it right now. I go to Europe, several times a year. I love European Masonry. I can't say enough good things about it. And you know what the crazy part is? The actual
they don't read the minutes.
Well, besides that, and they eat dinner afterwards because you're supposed to. But other than that, but you get into it, and it's like the ritual. It's quite a bit different than what we're working. But here's the shocker: they preserve the moderns ritual. So that's why it's like the French moderns, right? Because it is, and that's it. And so, did they add things and change over time? Absolutely. But I mean, look at our ritual system. Like if you look back, like when all the American Grand Lodges started forming versus now. There's been 2 major conventions, all sorts of revisions. Everyone's got local flair and stuff like that, but it's it's all pretty much the same Freemasonry. It's on purpose because it's been standardized, right? Because you can't sell 10 different flavors of ice cream; you can only sell one, and all Masonry is good as long as it's vanilla, right? So,
hey, take that to Grand College of Ice Cream.
Okay, sorry.
Grand College of Ice Cream will sell you any flavor for $10 a year.
But I want chambers.
But you
of
can't
sprinkles.
eat it.
Can I have those? Can I have chambers of sprinkles?
You can get all the ice cream you want, but you can't actually eat it. They're gonna send it to you. It's gonna be all melty. You'll get in trouble if you eat it.
Yeah, Joseph. So
We're gonna confer this ice cream on you. Please give $500 and buy your own regalia.
talking about vanilla, would you say that in comparison to what it used to be, Freemasonry overall, do you think it's going towards that flavor, or is it moving in the opposite direction to a Napolitan?
Well, I would like to see it where we have diversity of rituals, right? I mean, because like if you look at like what happened all throughout the 19th century in American Masonry, not just here, it also happened like in all English-speaking countries. We've had standardization, flattened out everything, took out all the things that make it interesting, right? So it's like, would you want to live in a country that's, you know, one race, or do you think we're probably better off as a country with all the different races, right? I think it's better if we have diversity. It's a, not only is it a strength, but it makes things interesting, right? You got different cultures, influences, same kind of deal in Masonry. So like one thing I would like to see going forward is that we have, like, the lodges have the liberty of choice. Well, the only way Grand Lodges would ever go for that is if we had standardized rituals. So one of the things I'd like to see
That
is,
hasn't happened in Scotland.
no, okay, fair enough. I'll
But
hold.
there's a whole nother reason for that. So I'll give you a pass.
Okay, well, there's my exception. But at the end of the day, like, if we have like just a different variety, and like one of the things I want to do is I've got copies of the original Moderns ritual, and here's a hint: you've already read them. That's one of the Easter eggs I put into the Secret School of Wisdom, is that it turns out that those rituals for the symbolic degrees of the Illuminati, they were literally like almost word for word lifted right out of the founding rituals for the Lodge Reinigkeit in Frankfurt, which was founded in 1742 by the Premier Grand Lodge. They changed a very, very little in those degrees. So if you want to know what did Moderns Masonry look like in England, go back and read the Secret School, and that's what it looked like in 1742 with a few additions. But I mean, even the tracing boards were almost identical.
So Joe, we're talking about the second tier, right? Not the first tier with like the Minerval degree and whatnot.
That's right. Second class of degrees, the first three symbolic degrees. The Constitution book has been augmented from what the standard Constitution book is, basically to favor the Illuminati system. But if you just focus on those 3 degrees, tracing boards and all, I mean, you can't get any more explicit. And so, like, you know, we'll talk more in a minute about like all the different rituals and things. The truth is that there's not really, from like 40 on, there's not really a good set of rituals anywhere for the moderns. And there's no real rituals for the ancients anywhere. So we have to rely on exposés. That doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means I haven't got to them yet. And I will, but just not yet.
That's funny. There's no ritual that Joseph hasn't found yet.
He's more machine now than man.
I sense evil in you, Doth.
You do have some pictures, though, that I think you wanted to talk through that kind of show some of these similarities between the degrees.
That's right. So let's go ahead and we'll kick up the first one.
I think Juan has those at the ready. So I'm going to wait for his tech to work. Wait for it.
And hold.
Holding. Okay,
there we go. Here. Okay. Yeah, so what we're looking at here is that it comes from a manuscript, 1740, called Simon and Philip. And there's some words up there in the top left that I can't see, but who wants to read them out? Juan, you want to read them?
This is the form of something lodges.
The old lodges?
Yes,
the old lodges, yes.
That's right. Okay, I figured out how to bring the screen up. So what you're seeing is well, first off, you look in the old catechism, it talks about the diamond and this, that, and the other. That's the diamond. It's in the center of the lodge, got the G in there. Look at those candles. Kind of an odd arrangement, isn't it? See those? Doesn't look like.
Is there one in the north?
That's a good question. I mean,
so weird.
What? But the look on the bottom there under the west, though, it says 2 wardens. So what we're looking at is, and if you go back and you read everything from Edinburgh Register House manuscript all the way up until 3 Distinct Knocks, which is the first Ancients Expose, the wardens are always in the west. There is not one example of the wardens, or the junior warden, ever being in the south. And so that's what I'm saying is like when the ancients, well, why is that the case? Well, it's interesting, and like when you read the 1764, is it a Hyman reason or Ahimon reason, or I don't know how you say that word, but however you say it, he goes in there and he talks about, can ancients work in moderns lodges? Absolutely. Can a modern work in our lodge? Absolutely not. And why is that? Well, because they changed everything. And that's what's going on here is they modified and augmented the ritual to basically keep those guys out. So it's like, oh, you won't let us into your lodges? Well, how about this? We won't let you into ours, and you can't get in if you want it. And so it's kind of like tit for tat, right?
Wow.
Okay, let's hop on over to the next one.
So before we move on, this was an example of an operatives lodge.
Yeah, that's what they're saying in this manuscript. Is it 100% correct? I don't know. Was there a big cross chalked out? Couldn't tell you. It looks like that way in the drawing, but is it stylistic or is it literal? I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't know.
So now what are we looking at?
Okay, so now what we're looking at is, and the notes on the next slide, but we'll keep right here. This is what it looks like under Desaguliers regulation. So remember we said this manuscript is 1740, Simon and Philip, right? You go read the catechisms, compare it to other existing rituals. It's probably about 1724, 25, 26, somewhere in there, just somewhere in that range, right? And it talks about these are the lodges under Desaguliers regulation. So what we're looking at is we're looking at a lodge in EA and fellowcraft configuration. Again, wardens are still in the West, and it starts to get interesting because this is now starting to look like one of those European tracing boards we've seen and heard so much about, right? And you see like the jewels on there, that kind of deal. But here's another important element of the modern's ritual. So in ancient's ritual, things happen in the center of the lodge room versus in a modern's lodge, it happens in the east at the altar, right? So you can read it. You can read it up there, and it says the compasses, Bible, constitutions on a pedestal or stool, covered with white linen, right? So all the interesting things that happen in the ceremony, they happen in the east and not in the middle of the lodge room. And that's another thing that the ancients changed, right? And the reason is because they would chalk this diagram on the floor, right? Well, one of the things Dermot gets all sideways on the moderns about is like, oh, you guys aren't chalking the lodge anymore. You're using tape or see those different tools? They would like take these little pieces of metal tin and they would lay them out there in the lodge room, right? And that's what it was. And so he got all sideways about it. But what's even funnier is like in a 1760s expose, they advocate for doing exactly the same thing that he condemns the moderns for. So I was like, consistent.
Well, I guess we'll copy them then.
Yeah. So it's really funny because you look at these things and you're like, that's interesting because it's starting to look kind of familiar to us, right? All right, so let's go ahead and advance a slide if we can. Okay, so this is where it says, this is the lodge under Desaguliers regulation, and the little note in the middle there says, note bene or note well, this circle and holy flame is added when the masters are taken up, right? So go back to slide 1. There we are. So it's EA Fellowcraft, kick it over. And there we are. Now it's masters. So all they're doing is drawing a circle in chalk and adding some holy flame or rays of light coming off the thing. That's about it. So when we think about those European tracing boards, they have like coffins and things like that on them. This hasn't occurred yet at this point, right? So this is another clue that this manuscript, though, about 1740, is an older manuscript. And what we're seeing is the evolution of how did these things happen, right? Well, we've already discussed that modern's ritual has 2 wardens in the West. It's always been that way. Things get interesting and happen in the East. They're also chalking outlines of floors, right? Well, over time, I mean, think about it. Like if you're going to go set up for a lodge and you've got to chalk this floor and you got a candidate waiting and this, that, and the other, you don't have a lot of time for this stuff. And so what naturally happens here is they start going with the tin and the tape. And then the next thing that happens, like, well, why do we get tin and tape? We can just get a carpet and paint this stuff on there and go right for it. And so that's how we evolved to tracing boards. Go ahead and kick to the next slide real quick. Go one more the other way. Yeah, that one. So this is what happens next. So what you're looking at is a French tracing board for an apprentice, right? And the Fellowcraft one differs just slightly for this. It's got a blazing star with a G in it. That's really the only major difference of it. But this is what happens. And so instead of like chalking things on the floor, then they evolved to tape and 10 tools. Now you don't have to do any of that stuff. You just roll this carpet out, boom, set up for the degree, let's go. And so it's an evolution of things.
Joe,
and
I
Yeah.
just made a weird observation, and this is totally elementary of me, but I couldn't help but think about little things that often get overlooked when you're changing things. And sometimes it's like the criminal who left a little clue. And maybe this is the case, and maybe it isn't, but in almost every prescribed table lodge I've ever been in, the wardens are always on the same end of the room. You know what I mean? On the opposite ends of the table.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. You nailed it. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly right. And that's why the wardens are in the two columns. And if you go back and you read these old moderns rituals, it's precisely what's going on. And so, like if you're in the West, on the left hand side is the junior warden, on the right is the senior warden. And as far as like in the old moderns rituals, they don't have a master of ceremonies. The junior warden goes and retrieves the candidate and does things with him around the lodge room, right? That's what the junior warden's doing. And so you're exactly right. That's how they're set up there. So it's like brothers on my column, this, that, and the other. Brothers on my column, this, that, and the other. And so you see the two columns there. So go back 2 slides to the left, real quick. One more. Okay. So we don't see any columns on this tracing board. We see 3 candles. They're almost in a familiar position, right? That one in the north's looking kind of squirrely to me. Now go back to the other direction, 1 or maybe it's 3. Okay, so look in the top left corner, the top right corner, and the bottom right next to that B right there. You see the candles, right? They're showing you where they're supposed to be. Things have changed. Up there in the east is the altar. Maybe if you zoomed in, you could see it, but there's a tiny little gavel and an open book there, a little stool for kneeling. Things happen there. And so what we're seeing is just like the evolution of things as they go along. Now let's go ahead and advance one more. Okay. And there's the tracing board for the master. You see the master's chairs up there in the east. And if you go back and you think about the secret school of wisdom, right? This looks almost identical to that tracing board. And there's a reason for it, because these tracing boards came out of an expose that was 1745. And so what we're seeing is more continuity of the same thing here. We're seeing that, in fact, and I got into an argument with a brother recently about this. He's like, well, there were no standard forms of modern's ritual. And I was like, did you read early Masonic catechisms? Have you read anything? There's a form. Were there variations? Sure, there's variations in jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it doesn't mean there's not a standardized form. Do we have any of those? Absolutely not. Are they going to be found? If they're there, yes. And so that's the idea that we're working with here. So here's where it gets really odd. So a lot of people will say that, oh, well, it was the French that invented tracing boards. They never used tracing boards in England. So let's go back. I think it's 3 to the left, or is it 2 to the left? Go 2 to the left, 1. One more. Maybe one more. Okay, I lied to you. 4 to the right. Where's the one with the guys like doing the horse thing? Yeah. That's the one. Okay, so I want to give a big shout to Dan Gardner for pointing this one out to me. This is really, really interesting. So this thing is in the Westminster Journal, 1742, and it's a big procession they're having on St. John's Day. Look up in the top right up there. Do you see anything? Does anything jump out at you?
They're carrying around a tracing board?
Well, that's exactly right. And here's even something crazier. Go look in the middle of that page right there. There's like a little wagon wheel, a little box that's got some letters on there. What is that? It's a coffin, and it's got 2 letters, M and B, on there. Very odd. And so they're rolling around. Basically, they've taken the regalia out of their lodge room, which wasn't a fixed building. They were just, renting space at a place. They're going on procession with this stuff. So they're marching it right out in the streets, right out in the open. And so that's what's interesting. And I'm so grateful to Dan for, finding this and pointing this stuff out to me. In fact, you guys might want to have Dan on, because Dan's a huge ancients proponent. He'd be a really interesting guest, and he'll totally disagree with me on everything, and that's fine. But it's still good to have, perspective and diversity of opinion. But, in a nutshell, we've basically established that the ancients are probably not the most regular guys. They're formed out of the modern's Grand Lodge. It's a big schism that happens. They're formed clandestinely, and they've made changes and innovations to the ritual. In this setting, we can't get really deep into like all the changes, but they basically changed the lodge room layout. They're condemning tracing boards and different things like that. Lodges are only going to be chalked. Also, they change masters' words, just outright change them. Not too good. But more importantly, like if you look at the rituals, the modern's rituals are simple and easy because they're not about a bunch of wordsmithing. They're about an experience, right? So they speak more with actions and ceremony than you can get out of some guy going on a big lecture or this, that, and the other. The trouble is, though, is they're light on education. And so it's like a balancing act, right? And so, what I'm getting at here is, we talked about all those different flavors of ice cream. I think in this day and age, we can have more than just vanilla. We can have chocolate. We can put sprinkles on it. We can do whatever we really want to legally with the Grand Lodge's approval. But what we need is some kind of standardized ritual for it. So I'm not advocating for like the overthrow of like current ritual or anything like that. What I'm saying is let's have some diversity. And in point of fact, you can't say that it's an innovation of Freemasonry because our current systems are technically based on a massive innovation of Freemasonry. So what you're advocating for isn't an innovation at all. You'd be advocating for a return to normalcy, right?
In some ways, yes. I do still maintain that the third degree in Masonry is the original innovation.
What's interesting, like when that book, Early Masonic Catechisms, comes out, go in there and look really close because what the word that the moderns use for the master's word, it's in like a 1696 manuscript. Also, the grip's in there. And so probably what happens is the ceremony itself is an innovation, but the elements for everything for that degree pre-exist, right? So,
yes.
and think about it. So if you're transitioning from an operatives group to a speculative group, you can't go make a massive change because you're going to get thrown right out because it's obvious what you've done here. So you got to work within like parameters. And so they've operated within parameters and made a new ceremony and started conferring on people that were not functional masters of the lodge, I think.
Well, that's excellent. I think it's anything you want to just kind of put a bow on the entire.
I had a quick question for Joe, or just a statement rather. I was just catching up with Wayne Greenlee out in Queensland, and he's a member of the Grand Lodge now, and he's been going through that, and he just got done saying that, like, it was just I was kind of like, whoa, what? His lodge reverted back to Irish ritual. They just can do that. And the Grand Master said he likes the diversity.
What jurisdiction is this?
Pinch me?
Queensland in Australia.
Okay. Nice.
And I was like, what? That's amazing. And so it's almost as if, like, exactly what's happening there. I mean, it could be advocated to say that if it works there, it can work anywhere. Actually, Wayne, when he was going through the degrees, after he became Master Mason, he went through the degrees again in other lodges because it was different ritual and all within driving distance. And it's all totally fine, and it's not crazy. They just do that.
So it can be done. That's
it can be done. It can be done easily. And all it seems to me that the only reason they don't do that is because they just like to have their hands on things, right? Because if all of a sudden you've got 10 different kinds of ritual, and then you have to somehow standardize it in a way that every district deputy grand master has to be able. If a district deputy grand master doesn't know enough to come in and be able to shut something down, then you can't have it around.
Or you just go the Grand Lodge of Scotland route and say, oh, keep your ritual, keep your regalia, just let us like administratively, own you.
Pay your dues.
And I think it's totally like legit too, right? I mean, I heard an argument too. Someone's like, well, there's no precedent for this modern Masonry in America. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because from 1729 to 1786 and 10 out of the 13 original colonies, there's only 41 lodges chartered by them. So It's the original precedent.
Shut up, you and your
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah, 41 lodges all practicing that.
It's like the
Yeah.
Grand Lodges that outlaw the rounded aprons. Like, you realize they're the original. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about facts; those are bothersome. But it's like, well, why did we go in America then from, like, we had moderns lodges and ancients lodges, right? Well, what happened? And I think, if you look at, like, after the revolution, people are trying to break all tie and custom with England, right? And so they got these ancients guys over here operating about. I think one of the things that happens is, and it's even evident, like in, like, the old Order of the Royal Secrets stuff, right? They want to have a clean break. So Order of Royal Secrets out of Jamaica, they have a break, and then boom, it goes to South Carolina, and then we're off and running. Then we get the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. Same kind of deal is what I think is going on here. And so that's another reason why, it's just washed away. And of course, by this point in time, the ancients are like on, like, their death knell at this point, right? Truthfully, like, if you looked at it, what happened, Premier Grand Lodge gets founded. They run till about 1813, but after, like, 1745 on, they go into terminal decline because the original guys that made the system have gone away. They get a successive wave of not very good leadership. And, just like when they're, like, starting to suck air, the ancients pop up on the scene, give them a couple swift blows. And so, like, the moderns are all about, like, kind of elitism, whereas the ancients are for every man, right? So both systems have merit, both systems have value. And it's really just understanding, like, where do they fit into the arc of history and what can we learn from them? We can learn from the moderns that exclusivity, high quality experience makes for an attractive experience and attracts a lot of people. But we can also learn from the ancients that, catering to that anyone can join this system, right? So exclusivity, but also inclusivity with the general populace. I think that really it speaks to, like, who we are as American people, right? So we can take lessons from both of these groups, the things that made them successful, melt them back together, and continue on for another couple hundred years of American Masonry, and with the liberty of choice, right? So if the lodge wants to work a modern ritual, do it. If you want to do an ancient ritual, do that too, right?
There you go. All right. So what we're going to do now is run through final thoughts. Rob, want you to ask any last questions and then go to any final thoughts, shameless plugs. So take it away, Robert.
Well, geez. I got nothing. I just love this entire thing. I'm always somebody who likes a little bit of controversy, especially when that controversy shows kind of an injustice that everybody's affected by. What never seems to get old to me, though, is how nothing ever becomes of it. Everybody's just kind of like, oh, that sucks. Okay. Just, like, goes along with it, right? Like, regardless of your government conspiracy, or, you read these articles about how government agencies did all these things to the populace in the past, and maybe even now, nobody cares. They just go about their business, right? I got my cell phone, don't need to, whatever. I won't get on this soapbox, but I love the episode. I love the commentary. Everybody in the chat had me cracking up. So it was awesome. If you like Masonic podcasts, please check out Whence Came You. That is every Sunday night at 9:30. 50 episodes a year. We only go dark twice a year, unless I have an emergency. But I hope you like those shows, and thanks for watching this one. Really appreciate it. And Joe, thank you so much. It was awesome.
Thanks, man.
Very cool. All right. Thank you, Juan Sepulveda.
As always, is a great pleasure to hear from you, Brother Joe. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really value the work that you do. I know that the traveling and all the time that you spend, it, of course, is something that is taxing on the body, and it's has an impact on your life. But just wanted to let you know that we truly appreciate what you do, because it not only it reveals things that are important for us to know, but it motivates us to do better by Masonry and embrace the beautiful things that we've inherited from time immemorial. So very grateful, brother.
Oh, thank you.
For the brothers watching and listening, thank you so much as always for your support. I have one quick thing to ask you. I want you to imagine that you're going to a degree, but this time you have a brother sitting at the piano, a a grand piano and starts playing step by step as the Master Mason degree is happening, portions of an originally composed piano concerto that is done by a brother exclusively for the Master Mason degree. If you want to know more about this, I need you to go to thewindingstairs.com. In the coming week, I'm going to have an episode publishing with Brother Josker Porschke. He's a brother from Miami. Amazing music for an amazing experience, and I can show you how to get it into your lodge. So go to thewindingstairs.com, and if you're here on YouTube, swing by the YouTube channel because I'm going to have video of the interview that I had with him with a little bit of playing in a grand piano. So check it out. Thank you, brothers.
Very cool. Thank you. Okay, Jason.
All right. Wow, this was an episode for the record books. As you know, I love bringing Joe on. So thanks so much for coming on and just wowing us with your insane knowledge and your love for old manuscripts.
Oh, thanks, brother.
Yeah, no, we absolutely love it. And one of the questions that we got on the chat, I feel like I should ask you, Joe, from good friend and brother James Morgan. Brother Joseph, which one would you have been a member of, the ancients or the moderns, if you had a choice?
Hands down, the moderns.
Awesome.
But I like European rituals and I like going there. So I'm definitely biased.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. This is just amazing.
Yep.
And
every time, is today the best day of Masonry? Yes.
Ever.
Ever. So for those of you watching, thanks so much for watching and listening to us week after week. We've got some exciting stuff coming up. First and foremost, we are about to send some pins out to our Patreon subscribers. So they are amazing. So if you want to get in on this, go ahead to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Masonic Roundtable, and go take a look. In addition, we're coming up on 5 years here on the Masonic Roundtable. So we are going to be doing our 5-year anniversary show 2 weeks from tonight. And we will have what will be then the best show ever, because we have Brother Nick Johnson coming back for it, and it's going to be amazing. And the topic's going to be awesome. And we already did an episode on the shrine, so we're not going to do another one. So stop asking. And yeah, we're really excited. We've got 2 conventions that we're going to be at this year. We're all going to be up at Masonicon in April, and then on June 15th down here in Virginia, in me and John's neck of the woods, we're all going to be at the Mid-Atlantic Esotericon. So come and check it out. Come see us. We would love to hang out and spend some time with you. A couple of us will be at Masonic Week too here in a couple weeks, to include Joe.
Hey.
So Joe, John, and I, and possibly Mike Hambrecht will all be at Masonic Week. So come check it out.
Well,
and that's all I've got, John.
That's awesome. There we go. Good stuff. Good stuff moving along. And I love one of the comments from the YouTube channel, or the YouTube comments, that says, "This is the best show ever, just like the last one." So again, Brother Joe, thanks for all of your hard research and dedication to the craft, and uncovering some of these things that may have been lost to history. But I know that the craft as a whole benefits from all your hard work, and I want to thank you for what you do in all your research, and it shows, right? I mean, I think everyone sees you as an expert in digging through these old manuscripts and finding things that might be lost to the untrained eye. And so I think your years of study have really paid off and helped benefit the craft. So again, thank you very much for that.
Oh, thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
And again, I love the ice cream analogy, that diversity is king, and I still want my chambers of purple flavor. So with that,
Or chambers of sprinkles, right?
extra sprinkles. and lots of skulls. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and keep searching for more light, and have a good night. See you around.